Here at Anvil of War Gaming, we're trying to help forge the tabletop gaming community. The individual that we're interviewing today is doing just that.
Anvil of War!
Today we're joined by a true champion of the tabletop gaming community. Someone who's taken Warhammer 40,000 and tabletop gaming and brought it to a small after-school program in a First Nations community in northern Manitoba. Pierre, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Hello, YouTube and your followers.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about your introduction to tabletop gaming and how you got into the hobby?
Well, when I was going to college is when I first started. Some guys I was in class with were pretty keen on Dungeons and Dragons, and so we sort of got, that's how it got rolling for me. And it wasn't until 12 years later and now being up north that I started collecting a Warhammer army. So I'm only really myself about 8 months into it, I suppose, and 8th edition seemed like it was something that made the game a lot simpler compared to the rules back in 7th, so I kind of used that as my springboard. It's like this was the time to join. So I now did the math today. I probably have about 2,700 points worth of Ultramarines that are painted and table ready, and yeah, I was planning on bringing it down to New Brunswick, but I decided shipping might be a problem.
So as we said, you're living in a remote location, northern Manitoba in Canada. I imagine that brings quite a few challenges. Can you kind of give us an idea of what challenges you might face on a day-to-day?
Yeah, well, getting anything up there, like as far as groceries, has been the biggest challenge. It's really hard to get fresh fruits and vegetables. Some of the stuff that comes off the plane, it'll be moldy already when it gets there or something, and so that can be pretty tough. We have 2 dogs, and so getting good food for them is always a kind of a process too. But the area itself is very beautiful, and we have a nice lake and some beaches within walking distance. So you take advantage of it when you can, since the snow is pretty much October to May, I would say, is when there's snow on the ground or the lake is frozen.
And what drew you to such a remote location?
Yeah, one of my friends calls it the lake at the end of the world. Honestly, like, we were just looking for an adventure, and she really wanted to teach in Canada. She had the certifications and everything. We were ready to go. But here in New Brunswick, where I'm vacationing and where I'm from, there's just not a lot of opportunities for that. So you had to be bilingual. You had to sort of be on a waiting list and that sort of thing. And when we started looking at a lot of these remote places, you realize, well, you're sort of trading convenience for a higher pay, but also sort of just a really unique experience. So, we both like to be alone, and you have to like winter, so that's important. So if you're into winter sports, it's the place to be. Okay,
so you started with teaching in the school. How did the idea for this after-school program sort of come to fruition?
Well, honestly, I didn't think I was going to be up there to do that. I thought, I would probably do some computer repair. I'd be offering it for free, but if people wanted to pay me and say, caribou or moose or something like that, then that's a great trade for me, right? But I really didn't want anyone to pay me for my time. I wanted to get out there and sort of meet people and everything. And, the people at the school had asked me to come on after, teachers, sometimes they don't show up, or they can't hack it up there, so they get homesick or whatever, and then they leave. So they asked me to teach at the school, and you got to wear a lot of hats. So in addition to computers, I took on gym as well, because you can't just do one thing. There's not enough staff to just do one thing, right? So I took on those 2 things, and then in computer class, the kids start talking about Skyrim and about role-playing games and stuff like that. And I was like, kids today and their Skyrim, I was playing Skyrim 6, 7, 8 years ago, however old Skyrim is now. And that's sort of how it came to be. D&D was happening, and because they wanted to see what makes you tick, right? A new teacher comes in the school, they want to poke and prod you, and I think some of the kids were pretty happy with what they found when they were asking me those questions. A lot of them play Fortnite, and they're doing various other console games and stuff like that. And so I got talking to them about, well, do you guys know what tabletop is and stuff like that? And most of them had never really heard about it, other than a couple of them who had watched Stranger Things. So I probably kind of owe them a little bit of a nod for all this too, because they, so they started asking about mind flayers and whatever it was in the Demogorgon. So they were asking about those things. It's like, oh yeah, sure, there's stuff like that. I said, but adventurers, when they start, you get clobbered by stuff like that. Like, you have no chance. That's a high level character problem, not a low level character problem, right? So it became something that they sort of like, well, they wanted to know more and they kind of wanted to absorb it. And kids are like sponges, and if you just keep pouring the information on them, they're just going to keep absorbing it, right? So
pretty amazing what you're doing. I have to say there's definitely positive outcomes from this, in the sense that you have a child that might be a little bit more reclusive, and putting them in this sort of a social setting might bring them out of their shell, which is fantastic. But on top of that, you also have the potential to steer a kid who might have been going down a path which may have led them to some trouble, and kind of focus them on something that's a little more positive, and bring them into this world which may be an outlet for them artistically, etc., which is just amazing. Have you noticed anything really dramatic as far as changes to their behavior, etc., maybe over time or over the short period of time that you've been doing this?
Well, I mean, the first thing that we noticed was attendance got better, because we made classroom attendance mandatory for after-school activities. So there were a couple of kids, one in particular, who, he might show up 3 or 4 days in a week, but most weeks it'd be maybe 1 or 2. Well, all of a sudden it clicked in, and he was there every day. And, he's in class more, participating more. And the other crazy thing, I guess I really didn't think about it before, is they got better at math. Like, simple math became almost second nature. I saw a lot of finger counting where it's like, okay, what did the dice roll mean? Like, what did you get? And that started to come a lot quicker to people. So maybe they were behind in math before, and they're sort of getting caught up with it, where, they sort of figure that stuff out a little quicker now. The artistic part of it, the creative side to the 40K especially, but also like they would draw their characters for D&D, but all of this creative stuff, it's worth noting that the ones who are struggling academically are doing quite well in the creative aspect of this game. So it's sort of giving them an idea of, you don't just have to be good at school in order to have success doing other things. So I think they're getting an idea of that too, and so that's an important part of it. We do typically 2 days a week, and so that's 2 days that they're not, just sitting at home in front of the TV or getting bored and going out and doing something else. And I mean, the kids here probably I suppose I'm not there right now, but the kids there are spending an awful lot of time trying to burn off that energy doing other things. And, sometimes they'll be outside climbing the school in the winter time because there's a giant pile of snow that lets them get on the roof, and they're just getting into whatever trouble they can. But as far as what you said about peer pressure, I think it's probably true, because you can't keep secrets in a town that small. So everyone knows everyone's, sort of dirty laundry. So if there's something you do that other people don't like, or, they think it's nerdy, like, they might think this is, it's like, well, there's a lot of people doing it now. There's more and more kids drawn to it, and video games are already cool. So it's going to come to be that they're really sort of involved in that more, I think. And we've already taken one more out of the sort of group and plucked him in, and he's interested in the Warhammer stuff. He built like 5 individual models in 2 hours the other day with glue that he'd never used and never doing it before. So it's really great to see.
So you've had some assistance in getting the program up and running. Who's kind of contributed into creating this awesome program?
Yeah, well, I mean, it takes a village, right? So there are some people to thank, and I mean, it starts with the ones who actually gave us the money to do this, which was the local health department. So they were fundraising various after-school activities and other things, and they were the ones who came up with the money. The whole council was very supportive. One counselor in particular, Jason Buzzador, I have to drop his name because he was fantastic in making sure that this all got done. And the support, I wouldn't have been able to do it without the support from my wife or the principal and the other staff who saw the benefit of this too and kind of went to bat for me about it. But some other things have happened since even when we sort of set up this interview to get people interested in it, because a Reddit user saw my post because I sort of wanted to share the story there. And I guess the reason I put it on Facebook too, where you guys probably saw it, is that most of the stuff that happens in these groups and, on subreddits about Warhammer is just us taking the piss out of each other's armies and, memes and stuff like that. And it's more of a feel-good story, which I thought would be nice. And, yeah. And so this guy from the United States messaged me, and he bought a gift certificate and wanted me to spend it on the kids. So Reddit user Never Dead Ned 22 also deserves a big shout out, because he spent, it came to 65 Trudeau bucks to get some stuff for the kids. So that's awesome. Another circumstance that came up from the post is people told me about this Games Workshop after school program. So I had to call them in order to get the gift certificate arrangements from the Reddit user I told you about. And they told me that such a thing does exist, because I asked them about it, but they didn't know if it was something in North America. So they gave me an email address and they told me to contact somebody. And I did get an email back the last day before I left for New Brunswick, telling me that I had to fill out a form, and that starting in August, there is going to be a North American after-school program, and he can't see any reason that they wouldn't be able to do it for our school, which is, like, honestly, it's been really sort of emotional for me, because I never expected any of this. Like, even you guys coming out and providing us with this platform has been really amazing. So to hear that Games Workshop might also be able to do anything for us is beyond my wildest dreams that I would have had, sharing this story with Reddit and hoping a few people would, get a laugh.
What are your sort of long-term goals with this program? What would you like to see? What are your sort of aspirations?
Well, I mean, you did talk about some social hazards earlier, and I mean, you hit the nail on the head as far as, they can get themselves into trouble. There's a lot of places and ways that, you can become unpopular, or something can happen where, because of the small size of the community, you can end up sort of an outcast for doing something. So the loftiest goal of this is probably to make being a geek cool in places where it's not already like that, because it kind of is, right? The Big Bang Theory era, the Marvel era, it's, geekdom has never been as cool as it is now. So it hasn't hit everywhere, but for the most part, in our cities and our towns, it's like that. But in places like this, it's still going to be the sports stars or whatever, and people who are the hunters and the gatherers and that sort of thing, especially for a community like this. But I want them to see that, there's a lot more to life than, if you're a good hunter, or, you can shoot a hoop or whatever. There's some leadership in there. There's some, decision making, some tactics. We cover a lot in role playing, and we do D&D as well, and the artistic side of it. So if it gives them a chance to sort of see other opportunities for themselves that they never would have seen otherwise, then that's the best thing that could have happened in my mind.
So I know in the earlier discussions you mentioned that the kids were really interested in getting into Tyranids, but you had to choose between the two factions, and then it ended up being, more advantageous for you guys to get into the Death Guard and the Ultramarines. So we've decided that we're going to throw you guys a Start Collecting Tyranids box set, so you guys can start collecting that army and get some more kids rolling some dice.
That's awesome. I mean, like I said before, when, these Reddit users are contacting me, and Games Workshop all of a sudden wants to, send us some stuff, it really warms my heart that they're willing to go all this way. I mean, with the money that we were given, we were able to build, as you saw from the photos, 2 armies. And so if, there's enough to start a third, and there's small scale matches where, then I'm bringing in an army too, we're having 4-player games. It's like, yeah, this is going to be, it's going to be great. It means so much to me. I just thank you.
As a longtime volunteer with Big Brothers Big Sisters and that program here in Canada, I would really like to get something else going in my community similar to this. So you've really been an inspiration. Thank you for being such a true champion of the tabletop gaming community, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Sponsored by
Thanks for watching Anvil of War.
Of the tabletop gaming community, rears his ugly head. Ready?
That was right.
Ready as I'll ever be, baby.